Well, comrades, you're all very welcome to this meeting of the Workers' International Network. Tonight, we're very fortunate to have Aman Kafa speaking to us about the recent events that are taking place in Iran. Aman is himself a socialist and a campaigner with links to the organised working class in his own native country, Iran. Comrades will have seen on the television sets in recent times snipers firing on crowds, people searching in morgues for their friends and relatives, families looking for their injured and imprisoned loved ones. There's an estimate of 2,500 people killed, but there's obviously far more than that when the real record is looked into, and tens of thousands of people arrested in these recent protests, which began on December the 28th against corruption, against repression, but primarily, as Aman will explain in an awful lot more detail, the economic collapse in the country. The real has plummeted by something like 40%. There's massive inflation. When the current events are compared to previous recent uprisings, it's far, far bigger this time, which Aman will explain. In 2022, which arose around the issues of women's rights, there was something like 550 people killed, a lot less than were killed in this occasion. In 1988, there were mass executions, thousands of people were hanged. This is a bigger event than that, and it began with economic collapse. A man will deal with these issues, but also this question of Pahlavi, the son of the deposed Shah. The Shah who led a repressive regime involving torture, imprisonment, corruption, and all that. His son is now claiming to offer himself, which is very nice of him, as the new king of Iran, a regime that was totally discredited in the past. I've noticed that Pahlavi himself lives in luxury in Washington and is calling for the protests to continue, where people's lives and health are endangered and imprisonment faces them, and in some cases hangings, although Trump is pretending that he's negotiated an end to hangings. And as I said, Pahlavi from comfortable base in Washington calling for the protests to continue. Hopefully, I'm sure he will be able to compare this recent uprising with the revolution of 1978. The new features as well we need to focus on, such as the U.S. direct or threat of direct intervention. Now, Trump may not follow through, but he has threatened. Troops have left their base in Qatar to be on the ready, and Trump has said it's imminent, although he's postponed it in the recent times. And lastly, something else which I'm sure a man will deal with is the failure of the opposition to have a clear picture of where this movement is going and what kind of program should be developed. So I look forward to hearing a man's analysis, his contributions, and his suggestions for the future. Comrades will have a chance to intervene in the discussion after a man's opening contribution, and then we can fill out the points more fully following a discussion. So, how much time do you think you would want, Aman?
Uh, could I try to finish it in 25 minutes, but could be
Yes,
allowed up to half an hour probably max.
that's okay. Yeah, that's fine. I think the situation merits that length of time undoubtedly. So say half an hour. So I'll give you a note or some indication, say when you've 20 minutes
Yes.
done to give us some idea as to where you stand. So, Aman, you can start now.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all for coming and inviting me to this meeting. I'm honored to actually speak here at the WIN sessions. Uh, I thought probably it would be a good idea to give a little bit of the scenarios as what we have heard and what has really happened. In terms of the general information that is given, is that what has happened in Iran was a popular uprising. This popular uprising was ending the Islamic Republic, and this popular uprising was crushed by the Islamic Republic. And this was the chance for the population to do something real. It was said that the Islamic Republic has suffered in the Middle East and is very weak. And because it's very weak, then something could happen. Two, it was the situation that the Islamic Republic forces were collapsing, parts of the regime were actually fleeing the Islamic Republic establishment. The whole castle was not only cracking, but it actually was falling down of the Islamic Republic. And the result was the closure of the internet. And as a result, the Islamic Republic crushed everything and everything disappeared. And in addition, we are told that it is the people in Iran who wanted to return back to monarchy. Every person in the street was asking for the return of the monarchy to Iran, and this was the demand of the general population, and therefore the people in Iran have spoken, and the only thing that is remaining is help from outside, and this help should be in the form of the support from the US and Israel in any way they can, and that would wrap up the whole thing. This is the scenario that is generally portrayed, and the situation in Iran, videos, etc., are taken as evidence to show this is the situation. This is far from the truth. The reality in Iran is the Islamic Republic is not weak because of what is being said in the region, because that's one interpretation of the situation of the Islamic Republic, because it's only seen from the regional point of view, and because it is weak, because Israel has won in Gaza, Israel has won in Lebanon, Hezbollah is weak, Iran has, Islamic Republic has lost its forces in Iraq, Syria is gone. So from that point of view, Islamic Republic is in its weakest position. In all these scenarios, there is nothing about the major problem that the Islamic Republic had, which is not outside, but is inside Iran. That is actually the one which is put aside. So the scenario, if you like, in this case, is shown as if this is the situation of the Islamic Republic from the point of regional forces. Now, in terms of the time where Islamic Republic is even said in the region was not like this, situation in Iran was in turmoil. The major opposition to the Islamic Republic is not external, it's internal. What we saw 3 years ago was the big mass movement in terms of women life freedom, very broad across effectively all the cities, general protests, mass protests, and the Islamic Republic had to go one step back and had to accept the rights of the women in order, in terms of at least one issue, which was with regard to the coverings. The situation after the protests of women life freedom expanded to such an extent that the Islamic Republic had de facto accepted that they cannot hold, they cannot arrest, they cannot actually intervene, because irrespective of all of the propaganda, women in Iran started recognizing that this is their win, and therefore situation in terms of the presence of women, in terms of how they actually dressed in the streets, changed completely. It was not possible for the Islamic Republic to do anything about it. De facto, it accepted it, because it knew at the background, should a further attempt be taken in terms of pushing this half of the society at least, it's not just that half, but the whole society is standing against it, and therefore they had to accept defeat and effectively, de facto, as I said, accept that you cannot arrest a woman because of the way they dressed in the streets. And this is common in Iran and has been so for the past 3 years. The situation with economy and obviously the protests in Iran did not cease, it continued. Then we had the 12-day war. The 12-day war started. With the 12-day war, it was the idea that by killing some of the heads of the military and some of the authorities in Iran, the people in Iran would rise. The propaganda at the time was people just come onto the street, and the supporters of the right-wing opposition to Iran, they not only stood side by side by this attack, but they said this should continue. they were quite calling, all of them were calling, from the monarchies right to parts of the so-called left. They were all in favor of anything they called weakness of the Islamic Republic, and this was sought by bombardments. That during that 12-day war, this was the slogan of the monarchists. The son of the previous Shah had gone to Israel, and they were all talking, Mujahideens, as I said, part of the left. They were all saying that the way to defeat the Islamic Republic is by the continuation of the bombardment. And they were calling this as a protest. The same forces then later on said that it is the people in Iran who have rallied around the flag, which was again untrue. It wasn't the case that they rallied against around the flag, but the other way around. They actually said, we do not want a situation like what we had in Iraq, situation like what has happened in Syria, or another way in Libya. We don't want that to happen to our country. We are actually defending the civil society. And this protest meant that all of the right-wing propaganda effectively showed its failure and lack of support across Iran. During that, post that 12-day war, the Islamic Republic tried to concentrate on the idea of nationalism, protection of Iran, and continuously they tried to crush any protest against this. This did not take any more than a few weeks before the protests in Iran started again. A variety of protests. In every month, we had at least something in the region of 50 to 60 protest actions, whether they were strikes, whether they were protests in different places, different groups of the society, teachers, nurses, universities, writers, variety of people, as well as I said, protests in workplaces, suddenly restarted again and pushed back the Islamic Republic. And the protests were asking for an end to this situation of lack of insecurity, calling for freedom, calling for equality, and this grew. As this protest grew, we had the situation of what happened on 27th of December, when on 27th of December of this year, some of the merchants, and these are not just necessarily big merchants, people who actually were buying and selling, they said with the fall of the national currency, with the devaluation of it being so continuous and being so unpredictable, they were not able to even deal with what they could do. And the situation economically in Iran, especially with the extension of the economic embargo, was the excuse that the Islamic Republic had taken, that the situation in Iran is bad because of the economic embargoes, and therefore they cannot do anything about it. The prices were growing up daily. And when I say the prices are going up daily, the extent of the increase in everyday needs has grown to such an extent that many families were thinking about situations where the 3 meal a day became 1 day a meal. The 1 day a meal became even much more meager. It was impossible for many to actually live. And there were protests against this situation in terms of demands for increase of the wages and ending to the scenario that we are facing with regard to the uncertainty. And when on 27th of December, this protest took place in one of the markets in Tehran, soon as that took place, it was like setting a match to an existing barrel of grenades. Soon it spread. The protest against the hardship, protest against unemployment, lack of security spread across Iran. The Islamic Republic immediate response was to go and talk to some of those merchants and try to actually calm the situation, and they provided some benefits to them in order to stop the whole thing. The slogans throughout the society was that it is not the merchants. Some of them are already benefiting from the situation of the trade in Iran. And there are lots of authorities and parts of the society which are even benefiting of this economic embargo. And this is not acceptable to the majority of the people. In the months just after November, especially, we had protest actions across the oil and petrochemical industries and variety of other industries across Iran. What happened was when these protests started, the Islamic Republic tried to stop the 27th of December, but couldn't actually hold it back. Protests continued, protests of the petrochemicals continued, the garage and other places. We saw variety of workplaces. We had leaflets and statements made by different sections of the society, the universities, uh, across different, as I said, workplaces, and even spreading across the nurses, teachers, and transport workers. They all started producing statements in support of the general protest that is taking place in Iran against the economic hardship. And this protest continued for about 10 days, and it was spreading faster and faster. There was protest with inside the steel factory in Ahvaz, and what immediately the Islamic Republic said is that we will actually honor improvement and giving in to all the demands of those workers. They started talking to some of the petrochemicals, trying to see if they can actually make that to come to an end. And at the same time, we had other protests taking place continuously, and the protests were gathering momentum. This was, after so many years, one of the major protests that it was so massive on one hand, and it was showing that there is clear support from a variety of workforce establishments, and different parts of the society were producing statements in support of the mass protest against the economic hardship and for improvement in life. And this was growing, and there were demands against the downfall of the dictatorship, asking for changes in the society, and the replacement of it with the direct elective representatives of people in form of councils. This was growing. After 10 days, the son of the previous Shah, Pahlavi, produced a statement. He said that now is the time. Come on out, as if people weren't coming out. Come out and stand up against the Islamic Republic, and this is the time. So it's 10 days gone, then this statement comes out. And the streets are supposed to give slogans in support of the uh, return of monarchy. Now, this is something which is very important because it changed everything. On one hand, they started calling up for an immediate action, and their immediate action is not something only by this part of the right-wing opposition. Mujahideen were in the same place. There were a few other parts, some of the nationalists in Kurdistan. They formed what they called the army of National Army of the Kurd. There were some groups in Balochistan, and these, if you like, religious and nationalists sections, they started saying that we are going to act something which is direct attempt against the Islamic Republic. Uh, this was a changing situation. It wasn't the case of coming and giving slogans. They had openly written variety of propaganda leaflets. They said, if there is a slogan, it should be long live Reza Pahlavi. There shouldn't be anything else. There were documents produced similarly by Mujahideen and other nationalists, and they were saying that if anybody starts doing anything, if anybody asks for anything else, use your knives, use your weapons, whatever you have, and hush them up. This changed the scenario. They started militarizing this. The situation was not that the protest suddenly became radical. It wasn't that. It wasn't the case that there was a degree of militancy suddenly coming into it. It was a direct attempt against this. We had Pompeo. Pompeo wrote a tweet. Pompeo is the ex-head of the CIA and one of the advisors to the establishment in the US. Clearly said, well done to people of Iran, and don't worry, walk along, as there are Mossad, the secret agency in Israel. Mossad people are among you and walking alongside with you as well. Clear indication. Israel said, we following the situation minute by minute. People of Iran, carry on. We are there to support you. And the whole scenario was changed. These groups tried to actually do something different. And this thing that they wanted different was what they called collapse of the Islamic Republic. Now, there is a huge difference between what the population was asking for, what was taking place, which was not collapse or meltdown of the Islamic Republic, but they were calling for overthrow of the Islamic Republic with an alternative. And the alternative was direct representation and the councils running every place. They acted against it, and the propaganda machine across the official media throughout the West effectively was the voice for this. And the voice for this was, if there were 2 people, 10 people, whatever number, in any place, all of the cameras were on them, and they were showing as if monarchies have taken over and everybody wants this monarchy. 2, all of the statements of different, any part which was organized in the society was acting and was calling up for something different. In the universities and in everywhere else, the slogans were neither monarchy and inheritance, and nor leadership, which refers to Khamenei, but we want equality and freedom. This was the slogan which was in the society. They were saying, we don't want any dictatorship of any shape, whether with some sort of a crown or whether it has got the Islamic headwear. This was a major thing that was going across Iran. And it was a continuation of a mass movement that was building itself, and it was moving forward, and they were pushing the Islamic Republic back. With the change of the scenario, with this action of trying to make it very much more immediate and calling for collapse, effectively what they were calling was not the collapse of the Islamic Republic, they were calling for the collapse of the society. We all know that Islamic Republic, even if they kill Khamenei, even if they take him out like what they did in Venezuela, it's not as if the Islamic Republic would melt down. It would mean that all a variety of its armed forces would actually be in the streets. And similarly, you have, on the other hand, those who are being supported by the religious, or, if you like, nationalists of different sections of the society in Iran. It was going to be like a civil war. It was going to be like a scenario we had, probably more like that of Syria and Libya to some extent. These were the scenarios which was going to take place. So soon as that happened, immediately we all saw a drop in the mass protest, and the Islamic Republic, obviously with the help of its allies, shut down the internet, completely closed down the internet, broke down all of the links that was produced there, and they started going on under the banner of fighting against those who are fighting against us. When you look at the numbers of those killed, the Islamic Republic says there are several hundred, and out of these several hundred, half of them are members of the Islamic forces. And it had the excuse. It went on a rampage. We all knew that there will be a rampage by the Islamic Republic. But this rampage was intended with one purpose, and that was to push the people back. What I'm trying to say is the people in Iran were caught between a rock and a, if you like, a cliff and a hard pole. On one hand, you had the Islamic Republic. On the other hand, you had all of the forces of Mossad, US, etc., the right wing, and they were both effectively working to the same aim. And the aim was to push people back out from the protests that they were carrying out. And we expected, obviously, the Islamic Republic to go on a rampage. It was something that they would have done because they called it existentialist situation. And at the same time, these forces tried to go as much as they could to actually force some sort of a collapse of the society. And with the attacks of the Islamic Republic, effectively they managed to stop what was taking place, and a mass protest suddenly changed. Just to give you a few examples, 3 years ago, for example, we had the protest which was taking place on women life freedom. 2 years before that, we had other sets of protests. Every 2, 3 years, we've had many protests. Whereas in this one, suddenly we saw ambulances being set on fire, buses set on fire, cars set on fire. The situation was just suddenly changed. It was a completely different situation. And everybody knew, anybody who was in Iran knew that this is actually being hijacked in a different way. And this hijacking was something that nobody was going to accept. And the Islamic Republic has now claimed, or is claiming, that all the protest actions were part of the propaganda and set up by CIA and Mossad. It was clearly said that even the monarchists were saying, we're waiting for US to attack. We're waiting for Trump to do something. And the idea is attack on the people in Iran. It's not the case that they would be, even with the 12-day war, we saw the same thing. It's not attack against some of the authorities, though they kill some of them, but effectively it's attacking against the people and pushing them back. And this is exactly what has happened so far. So what is our positions, if you like, in case at the moment as it is going through? A, we want a complete cessation of all of the killings, immediate. We want a complete cessation of anything that wants to actually change the society and collapse and break down the whole fabric of the society. Continuation of the protests as they were in terms of forcing the Islamic Republic to go back, and the Islamic Republic has been trying to actually uh, take back some of its propaganda on one hand, but at the same time is trying to allow certain economic benefits. Two, and last, if you like, is to make sure that these protests continue and the mass protests, as they were doing, for an overthrow of the Islamic Republic, complete overthrow, not a meltdown or collapse that would actually make Iran to something which is not just a civil war, but it would be something which would be a lot worse and hideous compared to even what we saw in Syria or what we saw in Libya. And this is what we've been pushing, and that's what is happening in the society at the moment. It has forced a setback on the mass protests. This is obvious. Everybody knows that. The numbers that they say are killed, they're trying to portray it higher and higher as they can. Part of it, Islamic Republic, part of it is the typical official media. They're trying to show the number of people who have been killed. There have been also reports that they say it's getting close to 60,000, 80,000. They're trying to imitate it as if it's the same thing that's happened in Gaza. These are nonsensical. It is the Islamic Republic is not in that position to carry out what they did 30 or 40 years ago. They're not in that position. They do know it, and they do recognize that the protest in Iran this time is very different, and the growth of it and the consciousness is much higher. It's not possible for the Islamic Republic to go back to what it did a year and a half after the uprising in 1979. This is not the position of Islamic Republic. Islamic Republic is weak in front of people. It's not the case that the position of the Islamic Republic is something that it can carry out what it could do. That's why it's on a back foot. Propaganda, obviously, they carry out. This situation, this enaction of the right wing, an action which is supported by Israel and US, is one intention only: to push people back. They could not do it in terms of military options, and 12-day war showed it. They do know that there is no popular support for this right-wing approach in Iran, so the alternative is now this alternative. And this is the situation we are in. There are lots of caveats in here, obviously, and lots of other issues which I'm sure could be talked about, but I don't want to go over my time limit because I may be talking about things that probably other comrades would like to comment on first. So if I could stop here, maybe, Finn, and then let other comrades speak, and if there was need, then I come back and try to explain a few more things.
Of course, thank you very much, man. There's a very informative, very, very interesting opening contribution, and it will certainly stimulate a lot of questions and remarks. I would say to comrades when they are making contributions to bear in mind that a man has a lot of information to impart about the situation as it evolves, and to use that information in their contributions to try to fill out some of the points. Everybody is free to speak, express any view they wish, and after a few questions or a few points, Aman, you can come back into the discussion. Then we'll continue on, and you can come back in again, and then you'll have the final summary coming up towards the end of the meeting. So, those comrades who wish to make a contribution, can they indicate now to give us some idea of what the order might be? I don't see any electronic hands at the minute, but I know there will be a flood of them later on because there's so much stuff to discuss and so many questions to raise. So, would anybody like to kick the discussion off? I just asked the question myself there, Emmanuel, when you're going back in, asking about the minorities like the Baluchis, the Kurds, Azeris, the minority group, the Arabs, the minority groups in Iran, what role they play, and to what extent is that ethnic division being exploited in the present situation? It's just a question.
Shall I answer it now?
It looks like there's nobody else. Yeah, go ahead, certainly. Yeah.
Sure. The protest is not limited to one place. It is everywhere. The general background of the protest is against the economic hardship. The question is not accepting the Islamic Republic version of the events that there is embargo. Everybody knows there is economic embargo, and people in Iran have always, a variety of protests have taken place. They have called for an end to economic embargo. We all know economic embargoes only have an impact on society. It's not as if the Islamic Republic is poorer. It's not as if its variety of organizations of repression have reduced. That has not taken place. What has taken place is obviously the impact of it is being forced and has given an excuse to the Islamic Republic to use the, if you like, the issue of economic embargo as the way or the reason why the situation is currently so. That's one side. So this economic condition is across the whole society. If I just give you one example, uh, for example, if you compare even in terms of the values and prices, in terms of the prices are very much according to dollar. So when we compare the Iranian currency to the dollar, this is literally showing the changes in the prices across all of the goods. If you look at what was the rate of currency of Iranian real to dollar, 4 years ago was about 20,000 to 1. Now is about 140,000 to 1. So across this last year especially, we're not looking at doubling of the prices, but we're looking at 6 or 7 times increase of daily goods that everybody needs. And this goes from rent right down to the price of tomatoes and eggs. Whereas the salaries have not increased anywhere near that. We're talking small percentages. So when you look at the ability of people, that has reduced tremendously. Two, when you look at it from the point of view of jobs, the number of unemployed have increased tremendously. Uh, the society at the moment, we're talking about 90 million people. So it's well spread. In terms of all of the areas, we have had economic hardship shown in different parts: electricity, water, etc., destruction of the environment. All of these have gone everywhere so much. So, for example, in terms of diverting part of the water and the water management and the misuse of the water management, taking out all of the water from underground, has meant Iran is one of the top countries in terms of seeing a drop in the earth. In other words, rivers are drying up, land is actually being taken out, agriculture has stopped, and this doesn't mean just in one area, but it's across Iran. So we have the situation of hardship shown in different angles and in different ways throughout the society. Secondly, everybody knows the question is not the question of money. There is money in that country. The question is who has it. We haven't had any single commodity become a rarity. All the shops are full of food. Everything is available. Everything is available. So money is there. It's not in the hands of the people. And in terms of the salaries and pay, the Islamic Republic has done a variety of things like breaking down some of the major organizations to smaller ones. Like, for example, in terms of petrochemical and oil, we have so many different companies. It's not just one company anymore. And they try to break it down. And the right of workers to have their own organizations, at least officially, is not recognized either. That doesn't mean workers are not getting together. They're not expressing their words, but it's not officially recognized. The situation with regard to the different parts of Iran, in Kurdistan, the situation is very different. We're not just talking about a minority in terms of national minority. In Kurdistan, the situation is very different because of the activities of the left and socialists in there, especially post the uprising in 1979. Society in Kurdistan is very much an organized society. When I say an organized society, it means soon as you talk, somebody will tell you which party you're in, which party do you support. Society is very much recognizing organizations and work. So Kurdistan is very different to other places. In terms of the south in Iran, you have some of the major industries that have been calling out, not only for the downfall of the Islamic Republic, but changing of it. So, for example, when you look at part of Shush, when we had like a factory like Haftar, it was one of the main instigators, similarly to that of the steel workers in the city of Ahwaz. They have got their own representatives. In city of Ahwaz, in the steel factory, what they do is every time they want to make a decision, they go to the main hall of the factory and they say, we all get together, we all make a decision. We all decide together, like a general assembly, like if you like a very, very basic council, that they actually sit there. They do not elect their representatives simply because election of a representative means just putting somebody in front of the Islamic Republic. So the actual voice is set throughout the General Assembly. The minority forces that I was referring to, these are the forces which are groups partially armed, and their intention is to take forward a nationalist approach. One of these nationalist approach, for example, in Balochistan, are the ones who actually are attacking the border police. Part of it are those people who actually have once attacked one of the Pasdarans, the main security forces of the Islamic Republic, and they are armed groups and they work in that format. And their intention is that we have our own section. So we don't have similar issues in terms of different groups of people or different nationalities. But you have, in many instances, the nationalist armed ones are effectively as bandits, and they are there. The Kurdish national force that they are talking about, national army, this is not from the people of Kurdistan. These are formed of very extreme nationalists in Kurdistan, and not only in Iranian Kurdistan, but even across the borders. And their idea is, for example, this National Army of Kurds, they actually did activities and they claimed it that they have attacked this or that police station or this or that person in south of Iran. So these are terror groups to a large extent, extreme nationalists, and these are the ones who are actually saying we are ready to do anything anywhere. These are not
I'm sorry
representative.
to interrupt you, Aman. There may be further questions, you see, so
Sure.
continue,
Yeah,
but we need a little time for.
sure. All I was just saying is that when you actually look at these groups, is not that these parts of the society have got different ideas. Women freedom um, movement started from Kurdistan, as the basis. So it's not as if you have got the issue of nationalism as different nations and people in Tehran. It's the slogans are very common across the society.
Yeah, thanks, Aman. I see, Norma, you've indicated you wanted to speak.
Thank you. Thanks, Aman. Very interesting and very short points I will make and questions. So, and two. First is what do you think about the international organization, international reactions through said to the situation, present situation in Iran? What do you think about the international reaction of, said trade unions, if any, human rights, European Union, United Nations, etc., or even regional declaration or said international networks about the situation in Iran, political. And the second point is, in view of your analysis, which do not came, just for today. You are a specialist of this. What next? What do you see about could be the evolution? I would like to know your opinion. I'm saying of different alternatives and the probabilities of each of the alternatives do you assign for a possible issue or situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Norma. Our next speaker is Dominic, and that'll be followed by Harry. Okay, Dominic.
It's
John.
John, actually, Finn.
John. Sorry, John. Yeah.
Two questions. One, we hear in Iran of the Revolutionary Guard. What is the situation with regard to the Iranian army? Are there conscripts, or is it a volunteer army based on the Revolutionary Guard? And I had another question, which unfortunately age seems to be catching up on me. But I'll leave it at that. We hear, oh no, the other thing is that the commentators I've heard on the BBC, etc., about Iran indicate that although there is seemingly a very strong pro-Shah voice in the recent events, that the Shah is remembered for repression. He's not some, if you like, easygoing monarch like we had in England in the 17th century, with King Charles being restored when Cromwell was in charge, that in reality he was repressive, and the reason he had to leave Iran was because there was a revolution against him, which unfortunately was hijacked by the Islamic Republic. So those are two questions. One, what is the nature of the armed forces in Iran, and also the fact that you've indicated how strong is the opposition to the Shah. So I'll leave it at those two questions.
Thank you, John. Very good questions. Harry, you're next. Harry, can you hear me?
Yes, Finn, my internet's breaking up quite badly, so just stop me if it's too interruption. This really goes back to the 2015 signing of the JCPOA. a very important nuclear treaty between Iran, European countries, the UK, France, Germany, but also China and Russia. And the aim of that was to effectively curtail the nuclear reprocessing. Now, Iran needs nuclear material to drive their civil nuclear program. That was accepted. But it was Trump that came in 2018 and effectively wanted it changed for no reason at all. The United Nations were satisfied that Iran was complying to the agreement, and although they had the capacity of enriching nuclear material up into nuclear power, they had no desire to do so. But that wasn't enough. That's what Trump has used as the kind of the panacea, the Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction and so on, that he needed this to start to move against Iran. He then applied the major sanctions. Now, Iran produced huge impact in the economy, beginning way back particularly around 2022. And that was the beginning of the process, if you want, of undermining the Iranian economy. Now, this is where I think we're getting to the point, because obviously the main source of revenues coming from the oil. Now, Iran 10% of its oil to China. Now, China needs that oil. It's not like Venezuela. 10% of Venezuelan oil goes to China. China could possibly manage that, but they cannot manage 30%. It's a major impact that if this intervention on Trump, the regime, prevents that oil getting to China, the big question now is what is China going to do? How are they going to retaliate? But effectively, Trump he's got a Trump card, if you pardon the pun, against China. He can use this, and this is the first real indication that he has really something now against China. And it would depend on how China will retaliate. China has a major Trump card, the earth raw minerals. They stopped that at one stage. The Trump regime had to negotiate a renegotiation to lift the suspension of the earth minerals. So the big question is now is if this goes ahead and America can now curtail the oil, what's going to happen to the Iranian regime? Is it going to survive? Are they going to bring in perhaps a Shah II to run the country? I think of that, it's going to have enormous repercussions inside the country, because the people, I don't believe, are going to go back to pre-1979 if they see a Shah regime there. So there's an awful lot yet to still quite take place. But this brings in the global powers now into this regional conflict. And we're going to have to see how China reacts to this in particular. Just the second and the last point is that if there's a full-scale war, if Trump intends to invade, he's not going to invade with troops. I mean, that's a question. The days of Desert Storm, America has not got troop capacity to intervene a country which is effectively the size of Western Europe. That's not going to happen. But it's not to say he could not intervene militarily. Iran definitely does not want a war, because if there's a full-scale war and their oil fields and reprocessing plants are hit, that's the Iranian economy destroyed. So they certainly won't go for that. But the biggest factor of all is Iran is a powerful military power. It's been built up by Russia, and they saw that. Israel found that out in the missile conflict that took place last year. Iran showed they can hit Israel and knock Israel out with their missiles and supersonic capacity. So the question now is, what is America going to do? I think they've rocked the regime. They haven't toppled the regime. And now it's going to be a case that if they really want to curtail the oil, probably, of course, bring the revenues to America, but in particular to challenge China now, what is their next intervention? Will it be a military conflict? And if that does fail, that we'll have to batten down the hatches because Iran has the capacity to effectively destroy Israel if there's a full-scale war. So I guess my question is maybe Astam could maybe look into perhaps his crystal ball. How does he feel this situation unfolds in regard to China and perhaps military intervention? Thanks, Finn. I'm glad you've heard me.
Yeah, thank you, Harry. So our next speaker is Matthew. Maybe following Matthew, man, you might want to come back on some of the points that these comments have raised. So, Matthew, you're next on the list here.
Okay, thanks, comrades. Thanks, Aman. Very interesting introduction, and very useful in terms of the situation. I think, I mean, following on from previous comment, I think also there's various things have been said on Iran. One, of course, is the intervention of Mossad and the CIA, and presumably their assorted British intelligence outfits as well, and how much impact that actually had, because there was obviously a lot of talk of this in terms of various bits of the left who assortedly support the Iranian regime as a so-called base of resistance and so on. I think also in terms of the view of the Russians, for instance. I mean, there's also talk of the fact that the notion that the Russians assisted in the regime in the suppression of the protests. Given the assistance that the Iranians have rendered the Russians in the Ukraine war through supplying drones and other such. Which is very interesting that actually, of course, I mean, the manufacture now of missiles and drones is quite low cost. I mean, even the Yemenis have managed to produce, on the basis of the poorest country in the Middle East, managed to produce quite a large variety of quite cheap drones and missiles, which they've been able to use over long distances against Israel and against the US. Actually, see off the US Navy, which is incredible. The facility to produce these unmanned munitions. So, I mean, the other thing, of course, is as the comrade is also saying, in terms of the position for the Chinese. Now, of course, the Chinese it's very odd, because obviously the Chinese and the Russians, both the Chinese and the Russians have a perfectly amicable relationship with the Israelis. So the Chinese have been quite happy. Is the biggest exporter to Israel is China. So they obviously don't have an issue with that. But clearly, as the comrade has pointed out, in terms of the Chinese oil imports, plus, of course, I mean, obviously, this whole thing comes into the point of the gathering move towards World War III. I mean, we have to say, this is the whole point of all this stuff. Is the Americans are moving towards a world war aimed at China, and of course the working class. So this is another step. It's another part of this, another facet of this militarization and so on. So look at it in that sort of strategic terms. The other factor I think which is interesting is that also the talk that the reactionary Gulf kingdoms are actually said to have been lobbying Trump not to attack Iran, because they see that a disintegration of Iran or reprisals from the Iranian regime, the country falling apart or whatever else, would actually make life much more difficult for them. So they prefer the regime they've got rather than what could happen, if there's an attack, or if the whole thing falls apart. And so the likes of the Emirates and Qataris, the Kuwaitis, and the Saudis are not in favour of further attacks on the regime. So, I mean, if you can say something about that, that would be very useful. Thanks.
Thank you, Matthew. So, Aman, you want to come back on some of these points now?
Yes, sure. If I may, there are two factors which I think we have to take into account. One is geopolitically. Geopolitically, the situation of Iran is different from what it was a decade ago. Over the past few years, the position geopolitically of Iran has changed. on one hand, it's on the road initiative initiative of China. That's one thing. The idea is that the belt goes through Pakistan and through the southeast of Iran from Chabar, and it goes right through from there across. So for China, the idea of even the side of the Baluchistan and the stability there is crucial. If you remember, as soon as there was a issue between the Baluchis and Pakistan and that of the Iran and Pakistan, and they exchanged some rockets a couple of years ago. This was something which China came in very quickly and tried to change. The idea is that is on one hand. Secondly is India. The initiative that is actually being taking place is connecting from India across the Indian Ocean, going up through Iran and railroads and roads which are being built, and to connect the India, if you like, route direct through Iran to Central Asia. That's another one which is taking place, which is the reason to interrupt that. You saw the corridor that Trump was talking about in areas like Georgia, going up to Azerbaijan and Armenian, those areas. So geopolitically, the position of Iran is in there. The third geopolitical position is from the Gulf itself, right through Iraq and through Turkey, and that is another route. So geopolitically, with the initiatives that have been taking place and the contracts that have taken place, the position of Iran is a slightly different situation. Which is one reason why any interruption in Iran would, to a large extent, would be something that, to some extent, US sees internationally and strategically important, rather than who is actually in power in Iran. There is another factor which I think is important to bear in mind, and that's the idea of Israel and the notion of what they call the new map of Middle East. Israel does not want to see any country, major country in the region, to have established government, and this is something that Israel has had as a plan for some years to pass through. The UAE, the Arab Emirates, have been working in that part. For example, UAE support for the forces in Sudan, support that they had for Somalia, part of it that Israel was the first government to recognize, Yemen. These are all areas that they didn't want to see any establishment there. Now, we have seen a change in the situation from the point of view of this approach of Israel. We saw Saudi Arabia took action with regard to Yemen. UAE support for the Southern Council, that they had one body who wanted to, they said, go for a military coup, and Saudi Arabia came up and put an end to it and effectively blew up the ships that was taking armaments. And here, the idea is a lot of these estates are saying Israel wants to dismantle many of these, and any dismantlement here would see a major havoc and a positive plan for Israel. So there is opposition to that across some of these states in the region. The plan of the collapse is one of those plans. Breakdown of or meltdown of the Islamic Republic, turmoil in Iran has got that plan at the background. So what I'm trying to say is, in terms of the US, in terms of the Israel plan, it's not about the people. That's the propaganda. The question is how much they can disrupt it. And two, and what is more, or if you like, important, is the difference between Iran and that of Yemen, that of Sudan, and that of the other countries in the region, and that is a recognized working class and conscious protest movement which are taking place. Iran is the only country in the region that has had two revolutions, a constitutional revolution over 100 years ago and the 1979. It has had two revolutions. The culture of the society, their understanding, and it's conscious in terms of the fact that if we don't want it, we can bring it down. This is very different to what you see in the region. And the third factor, which has to be taken into account, or rather the fourth factor, is that the Islamic Republic has been in power for 47 years, and the Islamic Republic is not like that of Saudi Arabia, is not like that of the Yemen, is not like that of the Qatar. The Islamic Republic has got many, many different sections, factions, and they all are well trained and armed. They've been in power for 47 years and they built it on this. It's an amalgamation of these groups and sections which work together. That makes up the Islamic Republic. So a collapse of the Islamic Republic does not mean like the old time that Shah leaves the country. It means all of these factions would be in the streets and they would be fighting with those nationalists and bandits that I mentioned, a civil war and breakdown of the society. That is the alternative they're putting in front of the people of Iran. The idea of the nuclear issue was just a, if you like, I think, a mistaken idea. The notion was put down on the question of nuclears. But the real thing that was happening during the Obama time when they did the JCPOA, the idea was a settlement between the powers internationally, between China, between Russia, between US, and presence of obviously Europe. Now Europe doesn't have that much of a big role, obviously. But it is that balance which came up under the issue of JCPOA, recognition that we cannot do this. If there is any attack from the side of the US, if there is any military action, that military action is not going to be with troops or boots on the ground. That would not happen. There wouldn't be anything like the time that we saw Desert Storm. This is bombardment. This is breaking down of the society. It's not collapse of the Islamic Republic. It's intended for the collapse of the society. That was the notion. And the Islamic Republic, by the same token, and its different groups, have set up ways of saying that if that happens, it's existentialism, and therefore they would unleash all they have on all of the region. If you put these together, the regional forces do not want to see that collapse, whether from the Israel point of view or the impact that a breakdown like this of the Islamic Republic and the extension of the escalation of the war would have in the whole area. So they do not want that. That's why they are actually opposing it. In terms of China and in terms of Russia, China doesn't want to. China does help the Islamic Republic. So does Russia. Russia doesn't want to see a situation. It didn't like to see extension of NATO and this stabilization. As far as Ukraine was concerned, this time they're setting up another one in the south of borders of Russia. So Russia obviously would stand against it and would ensure to protect the geopolitical position that Iran has for its extension of the trade that is following. So those would be opposing it. So what we saw in JCPOA was a diplomatic answer to the scenario. What Trump is doing is saying, what about a military answer to the whole thing? And that is what has been talked about. I'm just trying to quickly go through all the points that you've raised. There was one other point in terms of the responses. There is one response. How or what should happen? There is one thing about the Islamic Republic and the unleashing of what it has, and it does have power, military power. But there is another factor. The plan of getting rid of the Islamic Republic through this means of military has got one difference to that of Iraq, Libya, and Yemen, and that is the population itself. There is no guarantee by actually breaking down the Islamic Republic in this way. What would be the alternative that would come out? It doesn't automatically mean there would be a complete meltdown of the society. That's one possibility. That's one danger. The one they're afraid of is what could the society do? How could the society respond? And what could be the alternative from the society? That is a bigger threat. That is much more uncertain. The reason why Trump said, oh, we cannot go now, partially was because Israel plan and Mossad plan, and obviously the killing of many of their sort of groupings that they had set up in Iran has been devastated by the Islamic Republic. That is one side. The other side is, what would that society do? What would be the impact or the change? It's not possible to lift somebody like Venezuela and they're hoping the society will carry on. That is the biggest threat. So what we see in front of us is, again, what we had before. We have battles of alternatives. Society wants to overthrow the Islamic Republic and have something completely different. Rule of the people by people, through their own councils, a revolutionary change. The other alternative is breaking down and collapse of the Islamic Republic the way of Syria or Libya, or even worse. That is another alternative, using the right-wing groupings and the nationalist forces in the middle. That's another alternative. This battle is still going on. In this instance, they both managed to push the people back. But the situation in Iran is not resolvable like this. It is going to continue. Soon enough, we will see another protest. Each time we think an advancement, each time we see something a much, much more major and ahead of what it was before. This is the situation which I think is happening, and it hasn't ended. It's just a, if you like, a scene in the whole scenario which is taking place in front of our eyes. The protests in Iran are not going to die down. They didn't die down after the Women Life Freedom Movement. They didn't die down after 12-day war. They're not going to die down after this one. It's going to recur again, and it will recur again. What we're trying to do is to work, same as what is happening in the working class in Iran, for a revolutionary change, for a unity of working class organizations in workplaces and in living places. This is what is brewing, and they cannot kill that. It's impossible to kill that. This latest protest showed a major link between these two, which had not happened before. That's why they jumped in the middle, tried to stop it, and gave the Islamic Republic the opportunity to go in and obviously attack and kill many. But
Yep.
situation hasn't changed. It will continue.
Thank you, man. There seems to be some interference coming in from Ian's connection. Is that right? Ian, your area is lighting up there. Is it? That's it. That there's some noise coming through. Yeah, that's okay. Thanks. It seems to have been resolved for now. Thank you, man. Now, comrades who want to speak, could they indicate, please, so we can get some kind of idea? Yeah, Patrick, go ahead. You're muted, Patrick.
Okay,
Yeah, okay.
thank you very much. Also, Aman as well, thank you. One thing that I've been watching and listening and reading since the beginning of these latest protests, mostly the voices of people like the Grey Zone on social media, on YouTube, more than the mainstream media. And from their reporting, it seems that, and this is something you alluded to yourself, and also Matthew, it seems that the intervention of Israel and the Zionists has been very overt in these latest protests. And for example, one of the things I heard reported, I don't know how true it is that the Israelis managed to smuggle something like 40,000 Starlink terminals into Iran, which they plan to use, or they did use perhaps, to help foment the protests, not just the protests, but also armed intervention, because they also not only smuggled in 40,000 terminals, but automatic weapons as well, which were also used. And another point made by these social media voices is that in their opinion, and also the opinion, of course, of the Islamic Republic leadership itself, a large proportion of those who were killed in the protests, however many it was, were actually killed by, in particular, by these Mossad agents who are collaborating all the same as the Shah people. Also, burning of mosques and so on. It's an openly anti-Islamic part of the movement. One thing I thought which was very interesting was that apparently either the Chinese or the Russians, or maybe both, had succeeded in jamming the 40,000 or so Starlink terminals, so that this may have been, in the opinion of these voices, one of the reasons why the demonstrations subsided very quickly, was that they were no longer able technically to direct some of their forces in Iran, because the Starlink terminals were no longer able to communicate with the people who were financing them and supporting them and arming them and so on. My question really is, it seems to me, I mean, we're living in different times with, social media, internet, or lack of internet, but in this case, other forms of communication. It seems to be a new problem, perhaps, of how to protect a movement, a genuine movement, against this very highly organized and financed and armed agent provocateur in particular from Israel. How to protect the movement against these people? It seems it's a very particular problem, especially in Iran, and because of its location and the interest of the Israelis to basically establish a new empire in the region, and to enforce their will everywhere, whether it's in Syria or Lebanon, or indeed in Iran. And I'm wondering how you think the movement, if the movement itself, the genuine, the workers' movement in Iran, is conscious of the influence, of the direct influence of the Zionists, and what they can do, or what they have done, or what they can do to protect themselves against these people.
Thank you, Patrick. Very interesting question there. Jimmy, you've indicated you wanted to speak next. And if any other comers wish to speak on the
crisscross. Yeah. I have a particular question I want to ask in relation to the trade unions. And that is, have the unions the ambition or the organization yet ready to raise the idea of a general strike? Because I cannot imagine a transformation in society without a unity of the working force through the exertion of their own labours and demonstrating their reality. In the case of that demand, could the middle classes and the trader and commercial classes be won over to that demand, or would they feel that they themselves see the general strike a threat to them too? So I'll just leave it at that, because there's too much static on the line at the moment.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Jimmy. Very incisive, lots of information will emerge from that discussion. Roger?
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you very much, Comrade Aman, for a really exhaustive and comprehensive analysis of the situation. We learned so much from you, Comrade. I just have some very simple questions, follow up, really. You've largely covered these questions, but I'd like a little more information about the working class. It follows up largely from what Jimmy just asked. I mean, the working class has grown by leaps and bounds enormously since 1979. I was trying to look for the figures for how much of the population we could count as the working class, and I couldn't see any consistent figures. One figure I saw, though, is that it's anything up to 45% of the population. I'd be interested to know whether Aman would agree with that estimate. But we've seen also that this is very important, because the social basis of the regime up to now, again, correct me if I'm wrong, was the bazaar merchants in 79 onwards. Now that with this is a class which has been plunged into complete crisis and bankruptcy and just despair by the recent inflation, something like 50% inflation, I think, in the last few months. Again, that corresponds with what Amanda's been saying. There's something like 50% of the population, again, according to the figures I've seen, that are now below the poverty line. And of course, the regime is in complete panic. Thousands mown down. Uh, of course, as you say, not the 50,000 or 80,000, whatever, these figures that have been just conjured up. But anyway, something like at least what 2,000 or something, enough to represent a huge, probably biggest wave of repression since, as you said, the immediate aftermath of the 1979 revolution, counter revolution. But the consciousness of the workers, of the working class, we saw figures, again, you referred to it in passing, but we saw announcements or calls for the establishment of workers' councils. How much should we read into that? What do they mean by workers' councils? Do they mean actually something like Soviets? Are they calling for Soviet power? Or is it something along the road towards that, but not quite not quite so conscious? And also, I know you can't say too much about your own contacts. I know that you are very well, you're in daily contact, or with workers' organisations within the interior of Iran. Can you say something about the development of consciousness or the development of uh, Bolshevik ideas within the working class?
Thank you, Roger. While we're waiting for some other indication, I'd just ask two further questions myself. One, the recent railway strikes, which were quite extensive across Iran, is there any involvement in this current development from the rail and from the transport unions who are very much to the fore, and very recently, only a few months back? And secondly, the women's struggles which happened in 2022, is there a residue or an organizational link or some direct involvement by the people who led that women's movement 4 years ago? So they're just further questions. Now, anybody wishes to speak, can they wave the electronic hand in front of their portraits? I don't see anybody else indicating. There's no point in dragging out the discussion. If comers don't want to make additional points, and there is time, if they don't want to make additional points or ask additional questions, we'll just go to Aman's final summary. So, are there other indications? Okay, so going once, going twice. Okay, Aman, if you could give a final summary on the points you wish to make in conclusion.
Sure. Apologies, John asked me a question I didn't answer last time. He asked about the army and the security forces and the support for the Shah. The army is an organization in itself, and the army gets involved always whenever they say that there is something with the borders. This time round, the Islamic Republic said that, well, the army in Iran, everybody in Iran has to do anywhere between 18 to 24 months military service is compulsory. But the army is not a voluntary organization as such. What happened with the army? The Islamic Republic said that now that we know it was external factors, because of that, the army got involved in the crackdown as well. So it was this time round that the army actually came to the streets as well. The situation in some places were immediately made like literally a situation where the army involvement was clearly seen, separate and distinct from that of the Pasdarans or Revolutionary Guards. Another question that John asked is about Shah and support for him. There is like a country of 90 million. There is bound to be some people who look at it from the nostalgia point of view of the old time. You got people who have got an interest in the situation, but the mass population, same as the 12-day war, showed that there is no mass recognition for return of monarchy. Even the former head of MI6 said there is no such thing. The Shah's son is a figurehead. It's an olive branch. It is not the expectation that Iran goes back to monarchy. That is not on the cards of anybody. I think that's definitely the case. Insofar as the questions that was asked was another one with regard to the general strike or the population and how they actually work, which was asked, and Roger continued that. The population in Iran is now estimated around 90 million. This is interesting to note because 1979, which is less than 50 years ago, the population was 32 million. So we have 3 times fold the population. Insofar as poverty is concerned, official in Iran of the Islamic Republic itself says 55% under the poverty line. And the poverty line is the poverty line that the Islamic Republic has identified, and therefore you can see the figures are much higher. In terms of the working class, there are estimates of anywhere between 40 to 50 million being working class as a broad term of working class. That's definitely given. Personally, I think the figure is higher than this. The importance of bazaar or the market, we're looking at the merchant and merchant capital, and especially during the times of embargo, they have a place. But the big issues or the big things that happens in terms of the bazaar is even what we had from different groups inside Iran, from the workers, and I mean in terms of the different organizations, said bazaar has been benefiting from the scenario. Now even them are saying something. And it wasn't the case that because of the bazaar, the thing is spread. When I say, for example, what happened in the bazaar, I'll give you an example. It wasn't just the big merchants who actually went out. There were a lot of people who were selling things, small dealers, like, for example, buying a mobile phone today, selling it tomorrow. These were the people who actually gathered and came up on a protest, and that grew. So it wasn't the case that the big merchants suddenly came out and made a protest movement. The expression was there that this is not sustainable. The Islamic Republic said the issue of currency has been an issue which was brewed up by the people who were handling large sections of capital across the region to Iran, and that's what they forced. That's what the Islamic Republic says. But the actual hardship and worsening scenario in terms of economic conditions is something that everybody had seen, and it just sprinted a little bit further. But the situation or the difficulty had been there from before. The question about the general strike, I think, is one thing to bear in mind. General strike would only occur where there is connection and there is unity among the working class. That means not the workplace workers in every workplace and their known, defined, undefined organizations, but is the network that exists within the society as a whole. This is what we're working for. We're not working for a general strike. We are working for the idea of connection and unity and build up of these working class establishments, and saying and being able to identify themselves as general assemblies. These general assemblies are known as basic councils, where workers get together, they say everything together, and they represent it. The idea of the council, the word for council in Farsi is shura, and the word in shura is a direct translation of Soviet. In English, the closest word for it we have is council. So the idea of shura, which is Soviet, is something which has been brewing pre-1979. The idea of forming workers in their own and working towards Soviets is a much, much bigger section of the society compared to other forms of workers' organizations like unions, etc. What has happened is they're not in contradiction with one another, but I'm just saying where is the root. The 1979, this pressure of workers calling for their own Soviets and the Soviets to be formed, or if you like, councils to be formed in workplaces and in every living residential area has been carrying out since, as I said, pre-1979. To the extent this was important that the Islamic Republic, when it came to power, it could not put it away. What the Islamic Republic picked up, they said these shuras or these councils are Islamic councils, and they actually took over them by putting everybody else out, and obviously the killing, etc., that happened at the time. The extent of recognition of councils is so high that even the monarchists, when they are talking, they're talking about the council to transfer power. So councils in Iran, from that point of view, recognition of representation, everybody having a vote, being able to select your or elect your leaders or your representatives and being able to deselect them whenever you want, is very broad in Iran. It's very, very broad in Iran. This is something which has happened and it's growing. It hasn't stopped. It has been there since 1979. They haven't been able to crush it. What we are saying is there is a difference between, we all remember history, there is a difference between the time where all power to the Soviets happens or when it doesn't happen. Obviously, the presence of political forces, etc., has an impact on what Soviets and what happens to the Soviets or what happens to the councils. This is still an ongoing class struggle in Iran. Is it possible to say we do have workplaces, in each workplace people are doing this? Yes, practically yes. The way it works is that if you are having any protest against any workplace, whether small or large, officially you're not allowed to have them. There is no law in their protection. There is no recognition of them. Even in the oil industry, etc., there isn't. But everybody knows it's impossible to have, even in a 10, 15 people workplace, to have a strike action or a protest action without workers having got together, without having made decisions together, without encouraging each other. So it exists, but what we want to have, it making that existence of general assemblies as an obvious one, something that the Islamic Republic cannot hold. I gave you an example, for example, of the Ahvaz steel factory and steel works. This is what they do. That's what they did. Not now. They did it several years ago, at least 7, 8 years ago, when they announced it, that our General Assembly decides it. Even last month, they actually got together in the main hall and they said, we only talk to the management and the management has to come in front of us in this meeting to talk. Even in other places, in the auto industries, etc., any section that goes on a protest action, what they do is they get together either inside the factory or at the gate of the factory, and they say management has to come and talk to us as the whole lot, because this is the only way they can protect themselves as a whole group. The ability to be able to elect your representatives, what we have found out, as soon as the representatives are elected, they become pinpointed, identified by the Islamic Republic, and then tackled. And I mean tackled in any which way they can. So therefore, at the moment we have this as a movement. We call them the movement of general assemblies, the movement of the basic councils. If there is a situation where the political way, the Islamic Republic cannot hold it, then they can actually elect and do have their own representatives. And the representatives get together. That is the time that you will see the balance of the power in terms of what happens inside the councils. And obviously there is a change from the councils as we have today to the councils that we would have as the basis. Our slogan has been for the rule of the councils, i.e. the rule of people on people as the alternative to the Islamic Republic. And this is something we are working on. We do know that there is a lot of support for this. We do know this. The Islamic Republic knows there is a lot of support for it. But it is very difficult to show it because the situation at the moment, the way the repression is, doesn't make that possible to show how that can work. We're still working for the connection between the different networks in different workplaces, and that connection to grow more. Therefore, that political establishment could become clear. One thing which I must say is that when you look at the general media, I think this was well said by Patrick, I think, who said it. When you look at the general media, they portray their section, and that is shown as if that is what's happening in the society. For example, in all of the reports that I have looked at, from CNN to all the rest, to the Indian TV and all the rest that we've been following, none of them said any of the main slogans which was taking place for the 10 days across Iran. And that was no leadership, I know Khamenei, no monarchy, no form of heritage, equality, and freedom. This was a main slogan. It was everywhere. The slogan against dictatorship. Doesn't matter whether it is having a religious head or a crown on their head. These were slogans there. The protest movement that we saw with Women, Life, Freedom has had an impact. The impact of it is not because of what a group or another group says. If you look at any YouTube, if you go to YouTube, you can actually look at what happens in Iran. There are people who actually walk with a camera on their shirt, and they walk around in the city. And you will see everywhere. It's not in small cities, villages, to big cities. The Islamic Republic cannot enforce hijab. People are not wearing it. They cannot do it. It's literally there. It's all over the society. The Islamic Republic had to go back. They tried to introduce 3 separate forms of legislations. They couldn't enforce it. They had to go back. This time round, they were being pushed back. They were releasing funds. They were making steps to improve the economic condition. Then this thing happened. After 10 days, as this grew, the last 2 days was what Pahlavi came. Before that, there wasn't any Pahlavi. It was this growth. We're seeing this movement growing. Between these, we on the left are not powerful enough at the moment. And I mean left not as an organization, I mean as broad workers, are not powerful, are not organized enough to topple the Islamic Republic. The right wing is in disarray. They are actually looking for possibilities, and it hasn't worked. They don't have that power either. So the question is, if the situation in Iran continues as it was, the Islamic Republic would be pushed back further and further. If the situation changes to a scenario like Libya or worse than that, Syria, or much, much worse of that, and I think what will be much worse in Iran with the Islamic Republic, then in that case, the whole situation could change. So what we are saying, our latest statements was very clear in this part. We said, it's our job to safeguard society. It is our job to push back all these forces that want to introduce arms and armed conflict. This is what the Islamic Republic wants. We should combat that. It's our job to continue building on our workplaces and our organizations as it has happened. It is our job to unite them together. It is our job to form our alternatives through our organizations. And we're working on this. It is a continuous work. It is a continuous class struggle. And each time any one of these actions take place, we won't be surprised to see other protest action. This protest action was pushing Islamic Republic back. This protest action would not have brought Islamic Republic down, unlike what the right wing says. It wasn't. Their propaganda was, come out now or there wouldn't be anything. They did exactly the same when it came to Women, Life, Freedom. They said, come out now, otherwise we would be gone for 50 years. And we saw that's not the case. And we do know that's not the case. And the society does not accept it. So the protests are continuing. They are forcing pause and break on it. But it is continuing. It is growing. And we're seeing advancement every time. The advancement is what is there. We do know the Islamic Republic is not like Shah's regime. It's not like a glass that falls down and breaks into powder. It's like a crystal. When it falls down, Each bit stays as a bit, and each bit would be armed, and civil fights between the groups of these and the other bandits is what they are actually going to put in front of people. There was no way that there was organization sufficient for this one to be our last battle. It wasn't. We still have to build on it. We still are working on it, but we see huge advancement. It's this advancement that we can see in terms of experience of each time. Last time in Women Life Freedom Movement, they actually came on the street and we saw what they actually did. They built up the local places. This time round, they built up the local places. In Iran, every Tuesday, there is the protest in prisons across the whole country among political prisoners. It's a day of protest against the Islamic Republic every Tuesday in Iran against executions. All of the prisons. There are days which are allocated to retired of the telecommunication, retired of the oil, retired of the steel, retired of the auto workers. They have the protest weekly, and this is at the same time. So these have not ceased. They're still continuing. And they have been continuing throughout this time. But each time any of these protests took place in front of the parliament, in every city center, they said, we are standing together with the general protest of the people in Iran, the youth, and everyone else for improvement of our life against economic conditions, against this. That's why we saw the connection taking place. And soon as that was growing, we saw the action of the right-wing opposition giving fuel to the Islamic Republic, and that's what the Islamic Republic wants. The Islamic Republic was trying to accept and recognize the level of protest and wanted to make it into a military face-to-face battle. That's what they did. And that's the fuel that the right wing provided for them. Israel provided for them. And that was immediately the attack. So in Iran, what we see is these protests are continuing. It's going to erupt again, and it will erupt again, and it will grow. But the mass movement was not stopped because the Islamic Republic attacked. The mass movement stopped as soon as they could see the hijacking. This is what the right wing says. The right wing says the Islamic Republic cracked down, therefore the protests stopped. That is not true. Soon as they started to hijack it, they stopped going to these mass protests immediately because it was becoming a battlefield. In none of the previous protest movement, we saw people going and burning on ambulances, people going and burning on buses. Why would they do that? It was mayhem. So the protests stopped. And the Islamic Republic used the internet to do that hush-hush by itself. But they tried to say it's the Islamic Republic that crushed it because they were asking for monarchists. That's a lie. The mass protests in universities immediately, they stopped the day that they saw it's being hijacked. And that's where the Islamic Republic started its work and used the excuse. What I'm saying is the society was very conscious. This shows a high level of understanding political situation. They saw this is going to become another Syria or another Libya, or that's the fuel for it. And they withdrew back. Not because they were afraid, and they had reasons to be afraid of the Islamic Republic, but because they knew the Islamic Republic cannot do what it did 40-odd years ago. It's not in that position. So they withdrew back from it. But the interpretation of that by the Islamic Republic is, we killed Mossad. The interpretation of the right wing is, they killed the people. But it's not the reality. The situation in Iran and the protests are showing a high degree of understanding the political environment. They're not letting it to be hijacked. And this is exactly the same thing that happened after 12-day war. The Islamic Republic tried to hijack it under the banner of the flag. The right wing tried to hijack it under the failure of people not coming up in support of Israel. It shows political understanding. And I think this is the level of the conscious you're seeing in the society across a variety of recognized and seen organizations. The transport workers gave out their statement. The transport workers said, in their latest statement, which came out just a couple of days ago, they said, we are for the right of the people. We are recognizing the protests. We are against the economic hardship. We recognize the people should have the right to oppose and set up their own alternatives, have their own representatives. We are against any hijacking of the protest movement. That's the statement from the transport workers. And that is what we're seeing today. And I'm not disappointed, but this level of understanding among different sections of society showed a high level of understanding that there is no point of going further in this and then being hijacked and ending up somewhere else. This society cannot accept monarchy. This is why we say we are hopeful and we see the optimism there. And a lot of people in Iran are not, they don't feel defeated. The right wing feels defeated, but the society doesn't feel defeated. The same as they didn't feel defeated after the women's life freedom, because the Islamic Republic has not fallen. This is a continuous work. It's part of revolution on a daily basis, but this is not the final battle. We're not organized enough to bring down the Islamic Republic, and society knows that. They were making advantages and they were making progress, and this is going to continue. And the more that we see of it, I think the more recognition of huge amount of understanding across large sections of society, and those sections have come out. The Center for Writers, which is one of the known sections in Iran, they gave up on a statement as well. They said exactly the same thing. Protest movement is going ahead. Unity is the idea. Setting up our organizations is the idea. Not hijacking is not acceptable. We're not going for hijacking. And that's exactly the same which has happened in different parts of society. And it's a different picture to what we see in the media, which wants to portray only one answer and only one side of the story. The Islamic Republic says they have collected huge amounts of armors. They have, I think with the help of China and Russia, they managed to stop the Elon Musk's place off in terms of the internet. And the Islamic Republic is saying now that we could see all of the role was something which was in not real, but in social media. That's why we stopped the social media and the protests stopped, because they're trying to say this was Mossad's work. It isn't. That's their excuse, and the same as the other excuse. Society does know that it's not defeated. It knows that the Islamic Republic is not in the position it was 47 years ago, and it cannot do what they did 47. The propaganda doesn't actually bear any fruit. But they have to let this time go by. They're hoping that, or we are doing all that we can to form as much alliances, as much groups, that in case there is a military action, the society does not disintegrate. And this is happening as well. This lack of disintegration is translated by the right wing as lack of protest in Iran, and therefore the Islamic Republic says that's rallying around the flag. This is going to happen again. But it's not easy for the West. I think the main problem that the West has is not just attacking Iran, but the attack in Iran and its disintegration would do to the whole region on one hand. Two, they're not sure what would the people in Iran do. I think this is a fear. This is a major fear. Iran is not like Yemen, is not like Sudan. There is huge working class population and there is huge political awareness. But we need to be stronger. To overthrow the Islamic Republic, we need more. The reason why the Islamic Republic is in power is because the working class is not ready yet. If the working class was ready, the Islamic Republic would be gone by now. So at the same time, we shouldn't overestimate it, but I'm just saying, let's not underestimate it. We have to be realistic. Working class needs more, and the right wing is trying to bring its alternative, and so far it has failed. So they're not able either. And this is the battle that is going on. The war is still on. Battles are different. I hope I've answered all the questions. I don't know if I have.
Thank you very much, Aman, for the valuable insights and for clarifying a very, very complicated situation that's developing. So I appreciate that. I don't know, your hand is up there, Norma. Is that there from a previous contribution, or did you want to say something?
I just I thank Aman for this and mainly the last contribution, very clear and very important, touching key issues of organization, working class, protest, and assemblies. And precisely, Aman, there exist some statements, declarations, taking the slogans precisely you are pushing, you are stated explicitly, freedom, equality, and against, etc. In such a way, we can make diffusion and then to make some counterpart of the media, which, as you said clearly, just propagate one issue or one right wing, etc., etc. So, if there are some statements or one or several, we can make diffusion and make some help in that direction. Thank you. Because as you know, we have diffused, in Gwyn, the Arak factory Markasi province of worker councils, taking the name of English name you precisely clarified here. And so I wanted also to ask about the news about that, because we don't have all the news you have at hand. Thank you.
I'm sorry we can't reopen the discussion, comrades, but do you want to make a final comment there, Aman?
Just very, very, very briefly. There is, I'm sorry to say, and I think this is the difficulty we have, and that is availability of many things in English. This is whether you're looking at the things in Iran or you think about the political organizations. The Syndicate of Transport Workers has got its own Telegram site. It's in Farsi, I'm afraid. They've got their own Facebook, which I think probably shows the English versions as well. And so do many others. Instagram is one of the things which we see a lot in Iran. It's huge amount. Closure of the internet and closure of the Instagram is one thing that you would see. I just wanted to say that you would see a lot of these statements and declarations. There are many. Is what we are saying, what I was saying, was not the slogan that we have. I was portraying the slogans that was set on the streets and in the protest movement.
Yes, yes.
Yeah? In terms of the actual work which is taking place, our job, I think it is important that to recognize what we say. A lot of it is representing of what is being said, but at the same time, what is our action? We produced our own statement 2 days ago as a party, as what we want. And the main points that I identified are from that statement as what we think should happen. The situation is like everything else. We live in a world where we had the 12-day, where we had the 1979 uprising. It was west and east. Now we are in a situation where the 12-day war was taking place. We had scenarios of disintegration and attack. Now we're looking at a situation of Greenland. We're seeing Venezuela. It's the background which has made it so much difficult to actually see who would do what. That is still going on. The whole world scenario has become uncertain because they do anything. Anything is possible by these powers. China, Russia, US, everything is gone into disarray to a large extent in terms of the power struggles between them. If there was no power struggle between these people, I don't think the situation would be like this, what we see today. There is one thing for sure. In Iran, people are not looking towards the UN. The situation of Gaza and Palestine has shown a complete evaporation of any expectation from above. There is one thing, and this is one thing which is important, and that is right now everybody says in Iran insofar as the working class is concerned, in terms of the protests are concerned, there is no power outside that will come to help. So the only option is the working class everywhere else. Women Life Freedom showed that. It wasn't the support of any of the states or anything. It wasn't the propaganda talk and the gibberish they were going around. Some of the heads of the same right wing at the same time that was Women Life Freedom movement taking place, they were taking part in the Munich Arms Conference, etc. That was what the right wing was doing while Women Life Freedom was taking place in Iran. So they are advocating for outside help. In Iran, there is no expectation of outside help. The only question is how strong we built it so that the working class outside can actually see we can hold the power. And if we can, it's that group which is going to come to our help. Gaza showed the same thing. But this time round, that's the only way. There is no state. There is no balance of power. China, Russia, US, etc. They all would have their own ends and they will fight for that. From that point of view, our only hope is one. Getting it somewhere, getting the support internationally. Because without that international support, it can't withhold itself. That's definitely the case. But we don't wait, obviously, for the international workers to come in support. You have to do something. You have to take over the bourgeoisie of your own at the first step. And that's what we're working for. And I'm personally, I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful.
Thank
when I
you.
look across the last 20, 30 years. Come on, there was a country where everybody used to think there are camels on the street. Now everybody sees Women Life Freedom Movement International. We see workers and population of 90 million. This is the situation of Iran today, and we are very hopeful. It has hardship. It's not easy, but we are very hopeful. We could see that twice they tried the right wing to take over, and they couldn't. They tried to break down Iran in terms of disintegration of society. They couldn't. This is where we get our, if you like, energy from, and we work for it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aman. I'm sure all the comrades will agree that your contribution has been extremely valuable and very, very informative and illuminates a lot of issues which have created so much confusion in the minds of activists. So thank you once again. I've noticed there's about 13 different countries represented here in this discussion, which says quite a lot. And it means that we all have to go back to our own constituencies and try to explain and clarify and discuss further and read further about the issues, because what's happening in Iran has a universal application across the globe. It's not some eccentric development, it's part of a process that's happening on a worldwide scale. So thanks again, Aman, and thanks to all the comrades who contributed to the discussion, and there were very high levels of contributions. So before handing over to Roger, I just want to thank you all. Have a good night. Slán go léir agus ihuwa, as we say in Irish. So, Roger, do you want to say something about next week's discussion?
Yes. First of all, I just want to underline what you just said, Finn. That really, there's nowhere else. Although we're very small, there's very few comrades here. But as you say, we've got people who are active militants, active workers in the workers' movement in countries in every continent, and there's nowhere else we could have direct eyewitness reports from comrades on the spot and listen to each other's reports and convey them, and no doubt that will feed into the discussions in the labour movement worldwide. So I'd like to say, first of all, again, endorse what Finn said. Thank you very much, Aman. It was an absolutely outstanding contribution. I also would like to point out to comrades that last week our meeting of WIN was intended to be just a kind of business meeting, the organising committee meeting, but it turned out there was a comrade there from Minneapolis, and he gave a completely impromptu report of the incredible battles on the streets in that city. And we, for comrades who missed it, It's now on our YouTube channel and it's on our website, together with also another contribution, a written contribution by another comrade about the horrors of the repression that is being visited on the people, and particularly on the migrant population within Minneapolis. So I'd encourage people to have a look at that also. Now, as Aman said, we've got crisis after crisis, uprising after uprising, wars, struggles, all kinds of upheavals, and we can hardly keep up with all of them on WIN. But the next week, we have a report on the events in Venezuela. We're trying to get actually a comrade from within Venezuela, but in any case, we'll have a comrade from the region who will be giving us an update on the situation there. We're hoping also that maybe soon after that we could have a report on the situation and the crisis over Greenland. And in other words, comrades, just keep reading the emails that come out, reading the notices, and keep logging on. And if you can't attend the meetings, then please have a look at our recordings. You'll find them on the YouTube channel and also on our website. So thanks, comrades, and congratulations on what's been an absolutely outstanding discussion.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.